The morning started as usual, with coffee and a check of yesterday's receipts. I sat at the old wooden table in the back of my main store, sorting through stacks of crumpled bills and counting change. The smell of cinnamon and dried pepper wafted through the air, mingling with the aroma of the fresh bread that had arrived early that morning. The store had already been open for the second hour, and through the thin wall could be heard the voices of customers and the clinking of the cash register. At 10:30, Ephraim appeared. He always came exactly at this time, a man pedantic to the last detail. Tall, thin, with a neat mustache and a shirt that was always ironed, he had been running my 3 stores for 8 years. After my husband died, it was Ephraim who kept the business from falling apart. "Good morning, Donna Amalia," he said, taking the worn leather bag off his shoulder. "I brought the reports for July." I nodded, pushing aside a stack of money. Ephraim pulled 3 neatly bound notebooks out of the bag, one for each store. His handwriting was small and crisp, the numbers lined up in even columns. "Let's start with the main store," he said, opening the first notebook. Revenues for the month totaled 23,000 pesos. That's 1,000 more than in June. I listened, occasionally asking questions. The main store was running steadily. It was near the market and customers were coming in all the time. The second store in the center of town was also doing well. "And the third?" I asked, noticing Ephraim paused for a moment, turning the page. "The third?" He scratched his mustache. "Not so good there. Revenue was down 2,500 from last month." The third store was on the outskirts in a working-class neighborhood. A lot of families used to live there, but in recent years the young people had started leaving for the big cities. There were mostly elderly people left, and they bought a little bit at a time. "Maybe it's the competition?" I suggested. "I heard there's a new store across the street." "Yes, but that's not the main problem," Ephraim shook his head. "The main problem is the flour supply. Don Carlos raised the price 20% and the quality is worse. Customers are complaining." Don Carlos owned a mill in a neighboring town and was our main supplier of flour for many years. My late husband Rafael was friends with him, and our prices were always good. But after Rafael's death, the relationship began to deteriorate. "What exactly was wrong with the quality?" I asked. "The flour has turned grayish and there are some lumps in it. Senora Patricia came to complain yesterday, saying the bread is not good." Senora Patricia was a regular customer and a great lover of baked goods. If she was complaining, it must be a serious matter. "We need to find another supplier," I decided. "Do you have any options?" "There is one." Ephraim flipped through his notebook. "There's a mill in Santa Maria that supplies flour to the capital. The quality is good, but the price is 10% higher. Let's try it. Order a few sacks to try." We discussed various work issues for another hour. We had to replace the old refrigerator in the second store, find a new salesman for the third store, and negotiate a discount with the vegetable supplier. The usual problems of ordinary business. When Ephraim left, I sat in the back room for a while longer, going over the numbers. The overall picture wasn't bad. We were keeping afloat, albeit without much profit. The main thing was that the stores gave me a steady income and took up my time. After my husband died, work became my salvation. Around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I drove home. The house stood in a quiet neighborhood, not far from the center. It was 2 stories high with a red tile roof and a small garden with a lemon tree and a few rose bushes. Rafael had bought it before we were married, and we had lived in it for over 30 years. After lunch and a little rest, I sat on the veranda with a cup of coffee. The day was hot, but there was a light breeze blowing under the awning. I thought about the problems with the flour and about going to the dentist. My tooth had been hurting for a week. Around 5 p.m., the gate creaked open and Rosalind entered the yard. My neighbor and best friend for 20 years. She was a short, plump woman with neatly styled hair and lively brown eyes. Rosalinda worked as a home seamstress and knew the city news better than the local radio. "Hello, Amalia," she said, coming up to the veranda. "How are the stores doing?" "Fine," I said, pointing to a nearby chair. "Sit down and tell me the news." Rosalind sat down and took a handkerchief out of her pocket and wiped her forehead. She was wearing the light blue floral dress she had made for herself last week. "The news is interesting," she said, and I knew at once that it was something serious. When Rosalind spoke in that tone of voice, it meant real news. I'm listening. It's about your Santiago. Rosalind leaned closer. He was seen last night at El Gallo. El Gallo is a local cantina in the central square. It wasn't the most respectable place, but it wasn't exactly criminal. Workers went there after their shifts, pensioners played dominoes, and young people gathered there on weekends. And what? I asked, although my heart was already squeezing. When it came to my son, good news was rare. He got into a fight there, Rosalinda said. With Pablo Nunez, Don Juan's mechanic son. I knew Pablo, a guy about 25, worked at his father's auto shop. Quiet, non-confrontational. If Santiago got into a fight with him, it must have been serious. What was it about? I asked him. Overcards. We were playing poker, and your son owed a lot of money. And when it came time to pay, he started screaming that he'd been cheated. Rosalind spoke slowly, clearly enjoying my attention. She liked to be in the center of things, even if they were unpleasant. At first, it was just a fight, she continued. Then Santiago grabbed a bottle of beer and swung it at Pablo. He dodged, and the bottle hit the table. The table toppled over, cards and money flying all over the floor. I listened and felt my insides clench. Santiago had always had a temper, but it had only gotten worse over the years, especially when he drank. Pablo wouldn't fight, Rosalinda said. He's a smart boy, he didn't want to mess with a drunk. But the other visitors were outraged. Don Sergio and a few other men stood up and surrounded Santiago, told him he couldn't behave like that. And then what happened? Then Santiago started waving his arms and yelling at everyone, saying he was fed up with everybody, that he owed everybody, that life wasn't fair. Just the usual drunken speeches. Rosalind was silent, and I realized that the most interesting part was yet to come. Tell me the rest of the story, I asked. Eventually, Don Felipe, the owner of the cantina, came up to Santiago and told him he had to leave. Santiago argued at first, but then he left. He kicked his chair and cursed everyone in the room. I sighed. A scandal in a cantina is serious. News traveled fast in our town, and by tomorrow morning, everyone would know about it. Was Jimena with him? I asked. No, he was alone, though I'm told they've been fighting a lot lately. Neighbors heard screaming coming from their house. Santiago had married Jimena 3 years ago. The girl was beautiful but spoiled and capricious. She didn't work, spending her time mostly at home or with her girlfriends. I never particularly liked her, but my son was in love. When was the last time you talked to them? Rosalind asked. I wondered. Really, when? A month ago, Santiago came by to ask for a loan. He said they were having trouble with the rent. I gave him 1,000 pesos even though I knew I wouldn't get it back. About 3 weeks ago, I said. He came to get the money. Do they know it's your birthday tomorrow? Tomorrow was my 59th birthday. I didn't usually have big celebrations, but my friends and neighbors always came to congratulate me. I don't know, I answered honestly. I hadn't told them. Rosalind shook her head with the look of someone who understood better than anyone else. Children should be brought up from childhood, she said. And when you miss the moment, it's too late. I didn't argue. Rosalind was childless and always gave advice on upbringing with the appearance of a great expert. Besides, she was right about something. I had indeed spoiled Santiago too much as a child. We talked a little more about little things. Then Rosalinda left to make dinner for her husband. I stayed on the veranda drinking my coffee and thinking about what my friend had said. Santiago had always been a troubled child. He did poorly in school, fought a lot, got involved with bad company. After school, he went to work as a loader in a warehouse. Physically, he was strong, the work suited him, but his character didn't change. Drank, played cards, got into debt. Rafael in his lifetime tried to talk to him strictly, but it was of little use. And after his husband died, Santiago stopped listening to me. He married Jimena, rented a house on the other side of town, and we rarely saw each other. Of course, he came to ask for money from time to time, and I gave it. What else is a mother to do? But each time with a heavy heart, realizing that the money would go not for food or clothes, but for drinking and entertainment. The sun began to set, coloring the sky pink. The cicadas sang in the garden, and the sounds of music came from somewhere far away. Someone in the neighborhood had turned on the radio. It was an ordinary quiet evening in an ordinary small town. I got up from the chair and went into the house. I needed to make dinner and think about tomorrow. Maybe Santiago would come to wish me a happy birthday after all. Maybe we could have a normal conversation, and I could understand what was going on in his life. Or maybe not. This morning, as soon as I woke up, I immediately thought of Santiago. Rosalinda's story kept me up all night. I tossed and turned in bed, imagining my son drunk, waving his arms in the cantina, arguing with people he had known since childhood. Shame and anxiety mingled in my chest in a heavy lump. After breakfast, I decided to call him. I picked up the old black phone that stood on the nightstand in the living room and dialed a familiar number. It was a long ringing tone, but no one answered. I waited, hung up, and tried again. Same result. Maybe they're just sleeping, I thought. Santiago had never been a lark, and after last night's scandal, he could have slept through lunch. I decided to wait and call later. Around 10 in the morning, I went to the stores. Work always helped me distract myself from unpleasant thoughts. There were a lot of customers in the main store. Morning rush hour, when housewives buy groceries for the day. I helped the saleswoman Marita lay out the new goods and took delivery of vegetables. At 12:30, I tried calling again. The phone was silent. Anxiety began to creep in. What if something had happened to them? On the other hand, maybe they'd just gone somewhere and forgotten to turn on the answering machine. Santiago didn't have a cell phone. He considered them an expensive toy. I tried to concentrate on work, but my thoughts kept returning to my son. Around 1 o'clock, I dialed the number again. No one again. Now I was getting seriously worried. Even if they got up late, someone must have been home by now. Senora Amalia, are you all right? Marita asked, noticing my anxiety. You look pale. Yes, I'm fine, I lied. I was just a little tired, but I couldn't work any further. My thoughts were confused, my hands were shaking. At 2 o'clock, I decided to go to Santiago's house. If something happened, it was better to know right away. The house my son and daughter-in-law rented was a 20-minute drive from the center. It was an old neighborhood where mostly working families lived. The two-story houses were tightly packed together, with tiny yards with faded fences in between. Santiago's house was a corner house with a small terrace on the second floor. I parked the car across the street and looked carefully at the windows. All the shutters were closed, even though it was a sunny day. Jimena usually liked the light and always pulled the curtains open. There was no one visible in the yard. Walking up to the front door, I knocked. Quietly at first, then louder. No answer. I tried the knob, but it was locked. I went around to the side of the house and looked in the first floor windows, but the shutters were closed tightly and I couldn't see anything. They've been gone for 2 weeks, I heard a voice behind me. I turned around. Standing next to the neighboring fence was Don Raul, an elderly man in his 70s with a gray beard and attentive eyes. He had lived in the house across the street for many years, and we knew each other. Sometimes we met in the store or on the street. Good afternoon, Don Raul, I said. What do you mean you moved out? Where? He came closer, leaning on his cane. He was wearing a faded plaid shirt and old jeans, darned in several places. Didn't you know? He wondered. I thought Santiago told you. They left on the night of July 15th through 16th. I remember exactly because my wife had a sciatica flare-up that day, and we didn't sleep. I did a quick calculation in my mind. Today was the 1st of August, so they really had moved out 2 weeks ago. But why hadn't Santiago told me anything? And where had they moved to? Did they say where they were going? I asked. Don Raul shook his head. No, they didn't say anything. We hadn't talked much lately. To tell you the truth, Senora Amalia, your son has been a nuisance these past months. What kind of trouble? The old man sighed and looked at the closed house. Well, for one thing, they started having loud parties. Almost every weekend, a bunch of people would get together, play loud music, and drink until morning. My wife and I complained to the landlord, but to no avail. I listened with growing shame. My son was acting like an irresponsible teenager, not a grown married man. And secondly? I asked, realizing that Don Raul wasn't finished yet. Second, they started having strange people over, especially in the last month. They came in old cars looking unpleasant. Once I saw them arguing loudly with Santiago in the yard. Fighting? About what? They were yelling about money, about debts, threatening that if he didn't pay up, he'd be sorry. I wanted to call the police, but my wife said I shouldn't meddle in other people's business. My heart sank. So Santiago's problems were more serious than I thought. The fight at the cantina was just the tip of the iceberg. What about the last week before you left? I asked. Don Raul rubbed his beard. The last week was particularly turbulent. Those types came almost every day, sometimes several times. Monday night, there was such a big fight that my wife and I decided to stay at our daughter's house for the night. We were afraid it would come to a fight. And then what happened? The next thing Wednesday morning, I saw them loading stuff into the car. Fast, frantic, like they were running away from someone. Jimena was crying, Santiago was grim and angry. They loaded only the essentials, clothes, dishes. The furniture was left behind. I imagine this picture. My son and his wife hurriedly packing in the pre-dawn darkness, looking around, afraid they would be followed. What a shame, what a downfall. Does the landlord know where they've gone? I asked. Don Juan came the next day. He was very unhappy. It turned out Santiago owed him 3 months' rent. Plus, he hadn't paid the utilities. All in all, there was a lot of money coming in. How much? 7,000 pesos. Don Juan said he was going to sue, but then he gave up. He said he couldn't get the money back and it was expensive to sue. 7,000 pesos is a lot of money. I had about 1,000 in my wallet and another 2 or 3,000 at home. The rest was in a bank account. I could cover my son's debt, but where's the guarantee he won't make more? Don Raul, do you remember what kind of car they had? I asked. An old blue pickup truck. I don't know the make, but I've seen it before. It wasn't their car, someone was helping with the move. We talked some more, and I thanked my neighbor for the information. The old man clearly sympathized with me. He understood how hard it was for a mother to find out these things about her son. When I got into the car, my hands were shaking. Santiago had disappeared 2 weeks ago without a word to me. He owed a large sum to the landlord, got involved with some shady people who demanded money. Now he's hiding somewhere with his wife, and I don't even know where. On my way home, I stopped by Ephraim's house. He lived near the center, in a neat one-story house with a beautiful flower bed out front. Ephraim's wife, Doña Mercedes, worked as an elementary school teacher. They had 2 student children who were studying in the capital. Ephraim was just watering the flowers in the garden. When he saw me, he put down the watering can and came to the wicket. Doña Amalia, what is it? He asked, noticing my upset face. Is there trouble in the stores? No, there's nothing wrong with the stores, I replied. It's a private matter. Can we talk? We went into the house. Doña Mercedes was preparing dinner in the kitchen, but she delicately did not ask the reason for my visit. Ephraim led me into the small living room and offered me some water. I told him everything I had learned about Santiago. Ephraim listened attentively, nodding occasionally. He had known my son since childhood and had never had any illusions about him. So, he's back in debt, Ephraim said when I was done. And this time, seriously. I guess so. The question is, what am I going to do? Tomorrow is my birthday and I don't even know where my son is. Ephraim thought for a moment. We could try asking around at the places he worked. Maybe someone knows where he's gone or talk to his friends. He has friends? I grinned bitterly. For the last few years, he'd been surrounded only by drinking buddies and gambling partners. Still, it's worth a try. Would you like me to come with you? I have a free day tomorrow. I was grateful for the offer, but I didn't want to involve Ephraim in family problems any more than necessary. Thank you, but I can manage on my own. I just needed someone to talk to. When I arrived home, the sun was already setting. Rosalind was waiting for me in the front yard with a small cake in her hands. I thought I'd give you an early birthday, she said, setting the cake on the living room table. Tomorrow is your birthday. I told her about the trip to Santiago and what I had learned from Don Raul. Rosalind listened with growing amazement. 2 weeks ago? She asked again. And he told you nothing? Nothing. He hadn't even picked up the phone the last few days. What a scoundrel, Rosalind said indignantly, to do that to his mother. And you're worried, looking for him. We sat in the kitchen drinking tea and cake and discussing the situation. Rosalinda suggested different options: to go to the police, to go to Jimena's relatives, to place an ad in the local newspaper. But I realized it was all useless. If Santiago is hiding from his creditors, he won't show up in official places. Maybe he'll come tomorrow to congratulate you, Rosalind suggested. After all, you are his mother. Maybe, I agreed, though I didn't hold out much hope. When Rosalind left, I tried calling Santiago again. The result was the same, long beeps and silence. I hung up and went to get ready for bed. As I lay in bed, I thought about how in 32 years my little boy had turned into a man I hardly recognized. When he was a child, I had dreamed of what he would become: kind, responsible, successful. The reality turned out to be very different. But tomorrow was my birthday, and I decided not to think about sad things. Maybe Santiago would actually show up and explain what was going on, or maybe there would be some simple solution to all the problems. Sometimes life has its pleasant surprises, though deep down I knew I was hoping in vain. On the morning of August 2nd, I woke up earlier than usual. My birthday had always been a special day, even in the years when I didn't particularly want to celebrate it. 59 was a respectable age for a woman in our town. Many women my age were already grandmothers, nursing grandchildren, complaining about their health. And I was still working, managing stores, living alone in a big house. After breakfast, I tidied up the house, even though it was already clean. I vacuumed the carpets, dusted, put fresh flowers from the garden in vases. In the living room, I arranged the chairs so that guests could sit and talk comfortably. In the kitchen, she checked the stock of coffee, tea, and cookies. Neighbors and acquaintances would surely come to congratulate her. At about 10 o'clock in the morning, Rosalind was the first to arrive. She wore a smart yellow dress with a lace collar, her hair neatly arranged. In her hands, she carried a large basket of groceries. "Happy birthday, dear," she exclaimed, hugging me. "Let's prepare the festive table." "Rosalind, you didn't have to splurge," I said, looking into the basket. There were fresh buns, cheese, ham, and fruit. "Don't be silly," my friend said. "It's your birthday. We should celebrate it properly." We went into the kitchen and started cooking. Rosalind sliced the cheese and ham into thin slices, while I brewed coffee and took homemade jam out of the refrigerator. The sun was shining outside the window, and my mood was improving. "Had you heard from Santiago?" Rosalind asked, arranging the food on the plates. "No," I answered, "but maybe he'll show up again." "Of course he will," she said confidently. "He couldn't miss Mom's birthday." Deep down, I wasn't so optimistic, but I didn't argue. The day was just beginning, and I didn't want to spoil the mood beforehand. The first guests were neighbors, the Perez family, who lived across the street. Don Miguel worked in the mayor's office, and Senora Dolores taught high school. Their daughter Carmen and their young son came with them. The boy was 3 years old, and he was curious about my house, grabbing everything in sight with his hands. "Amalia, my dear, happy holiday," said Senora Dolores, handing me a beautifully wrapped gift. "It's a little souvenir from our family." Inside was an exquisite handmade ceramic candlestick. I thanked my neighbors and invited them to the table. We sat in the living room, drinking coffee and eating scones with jam. Don Miguel told me the news from the town hall. The town was planning to renovate the central square, and Senora Dolores complained about the modern school children who didn't want to learn. Around noon, more guests arrived. Doña Esther, who was a market vendor, Don Alejandro from the next block, Senora Cristina from the church choir. Each brought a small gift box of chocolates, a bouquet of flowers, an embroidered doily. The house filled with voices, laughter, the aroma of coffee. Rosalind bustled about, pouring tea and coffee for the guests, serving cookies. She clearly enjoyed her role as hostess and accepted congratulations as if the birthday were her own. "Where is Santiago?" Donna Esther asked. "Did he forget about Mom's birthday?" "He's busy at work," I lied, "but he promised to come tonight." "Of course he would," Rosalinda said. "A son can't miss a day like this." At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Efrain and his wife arrived. Doña Mercedes brought a homemade apple pie that smelled of cinnamon and vanilla. Efrain handed me an envelope of money, a traditional gift from a business partner. "This is for something nice for yourself," he said, "for a vacation or a new dress." We cut the cake and sat down at the table. Efrain talked about problems with suppliers, Donna Mercedes about her students. Everything was peaceful and family-like. I had almost forgotten the worries of the last few days. By 4 o'clock, the guests began to disperse. Everyone had their own things to do. Some had to cook dinner, some had to pick up their children from school. The house gradually emptied, and it was just Rosalind and me. "It was a good party," she said, picking up the dirty dishes. "People love and respect you." "Yes, thank you for your help," I said. "I couldn't have done it without you." We washed the dishes, cleared the table, put the presents in a separate box. In the kitchen, we prepared a light supper: salad, soup, leftover pie. Rosalinda was about to leave, but I asked her to stay a little longer. "In case Santiago does come," I said. "I wanted someone to be there for me." "Of course I'll stay," she agreed. "My husband can take care of dinner." We sat on the veranda, drinking tea and watching the sun go down. The day was successful. The guests sincerely congratulated, gave nice gifts. But in the depths of my soul, I felt emptiness. The main person, my son, was not around. At about 8 p.m., voices were heard outside the gate. I looked out into the yard and saw Santiago and Jimena. My heart beat faster. It meant he had come after all. But the joy didn't last long. It was clear from the way they were walking that they had both been drinking heavily. Santiago swayed, holding onto the fence. Jimena laughed loudly and waved her arms. In his son's hands was a crumpled supermarket bag. "Mom!" Santiago shouted, struggling to open the gate. "Happy birthday!" They went up to the veranda. Santiago looked bad, unshaven in a crumpled shirt with red eyes. He smelled strongly of beer. Jimena was wearing a short, bright pink dress that was clearly not appropriate for a visit to her mother-in-law. Her makeup was smudged, her hair disheveled. "Hi, Mommy," she said, smiling uncertainly. "I'm sorry I'm so late. We had things to do." "Hello," I replied dryly. "Come on in the house." Rosalind got up from her chair and nodded to her guests. I could see from her face that she disapproved of their condition, but her upbringing prevented her from speaking directly. "We've brought the cake," Santiago announced, taking a box out of the bag, specially for the birthday girl. The cake was cheap, from the supermarket, a sponge with white cream and the words "Happy Birthday" in blue letters. They sold them for 100 pesos apiece in the bakery department. "Thank you," I said, taking the box. "Have a seat and tell me how you're doing." We went into the living room. Santiago plopped down in a chair. Jimena sat on the couch with her legs tucked under her. Rosalinda remained standing by the door, clearly uncomfortable. "Things are complicated, Mother," Santiago began. "Very difficult. We had to move out of the apartment." "I know," I replied. Don Raul told me. "See? Oh, that old gossip," my son said with a wave of his hand. "He must have said too much. He said you moved out 2 weeks ago without paying your rent, and that some people came to see you demanding money." Santiago and Jimena looked at each other. It was obvious that they hadn't expected me to know so much. "It's only temporary," Jimena said. "Things will get better soon." "In the meantime, where do you live?" I asked. "With friends," Santiago answered vaguely. "One or the other. But it's inconvenient, you know. You need a permanent place." I began to realize where he was going, but I decided not to rush things. "Mom, can we spend the night at your place?" my son asked. "Tomorrow we'll find something permanent, but today we're very tired." I looked at Rosalind. My friend shook her head slightly, but I decided to give my son a chance. "Okay," I agreed. "You can stay one night." "Thank you, Mommy." Jimena was so happy. "You're so kind." Rosalinda said goodbye and went home. I walked her to the gate. "Be careful," she said quietly. "I don't like the way they're acting." "He's my son," I said. "Where can he go?" "Your son is a drunk and a loser," Rosalind said stiffly. "And sooner or later he will bring you much grief." When I returned to the house, Santiago and Jimena were sitting in the kitchen eating the leftovers from the holiday dinner. They were obviously hungry. They were chowing down greedily. "The salad is delicious," Jimena said with her mouth full. "Are we going to cut the cake?" "Let's do it tomorrow," I suggested. "It's late." We talked a little about small things. Santiago told about working at the warehouse, complaining about the low wages and the evil boss. Jimena talked about her friends, about new TV shows, about wanting to buy a nice dress. The usual chatter that hid the tension. Around 10 p.m., I showed them to the guest room on the second floor. There was a double bed, a closet, a small table. The room was clean and cozy. I cleaned it regularly, even though I rarely had guests. Thanks, Mom, Santiago said. You really helped us out. Good night, I said, and went to my room. But I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed and listened to the sounds from the next room. At first, I heard muffled voices, Santiago and Jimena arguing quietly. Then there was silence. Around midnight, there was a knock on my door. Mom, are you awake? Santiago called out. Can I talk to you? I got up, threw on my robe, and opened the door. My son was standing in the hallway in his underwear and t-shirt. He looked serious. What happened? I asked. Let's go downstairs. We need to have a serious talk. We went into the living room. Santiago sat in an armchair, and I sat on the couch across from him. The house was quiet. Only the clock on the wall was ticking. Mom, I have to tell you the truth, he began. We're in really big trouble, really big problems. What kind of problems? I owe money, a lot of money, and these people are no joke. They can hurt us. My heart sank. It's one thing to hear it from a neighbor, but it's another thing to hear it from your son. How much do you owe? I asked. 15,000 pesos, Santiago said quietly. I gasped. 15,000 was half the annual profit from the stores. A huge sum for our family. What was that money for? I played poker. I lost. Thought I'd win it back, so I borrowed some more money. Lost again. Santiago, how could you hide? I exclaimed. You have a wife responsibility. I know. He clutched his head. But it's too late for regrets now. We have to do something. And what do you suggest? Santiago was silent for a moment. Then he looked me in the eye. Mom, can we stay here? Not just for one night, but for good? What do you mean permanently? Well, until the debt problem is solved. And then we'll see. It's a big house. There's plenty of room for everyone. I felt anger boiling up in my chest. So this was the plan all along. Show up drunk on my birthday, win me over, and then take over the house. Santiago, this is my house, I said firmly. I'm not going to share it with anyone else. Mom, but we're a family. He was indignant. And a family is supposed to help each other. A family is supposed to be honest with each other. And you lied to me, disappeared for 2 weeks without saying a word. I didn't want to upset you. And now you do? Santiago got up from his chair and started pacing around the room. Listen, Mom, I realize what I did was wrong. But this is about our safety right now. This house is too big for one old woman, and we really need a place to live. The word old lady was a slap in the face. My own son called me an old woman. On my birthday. I'm not an old woman, I said coldly. And this is my house. I'm not giving it up. Then why don't you move in with Rosalinda? Santiago suggested it. You two are friends. We'll stay here for a while. What? I couldn't believe my ears. You want me to move out of my own house? Temporarily, until we work things out. No, I said flatly. Never. Santiago stopped and looked at me. I saw an anger in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. Mom, you don't understand, he said, raising his voice. I'm being threatened. We need a place to hide. Then go to the police. The police won't help. It's none of their business. Then it's none of my business either. Santiago came closer. Now he towered over me, and I felt afraid. Mom, I'm not asking. I'm demanding, he shouted. This house is too big for one old woman. You're selfish. You only think about yourself. Don't yell at me, I yelled back. This is my house, and I'm not going anywhere. Yes, you are, Santiago roared. You're going to your precious Rosalinda, and we'll stay here. The shouting woke Jimena. She came down the stairs in her nightgown, confused and frightened. Why are you fighting? She asked. The neighbors will hear. Your mother-in-law won't help us, shouted Santiago. She's kicking us out on the street. I'm not kicking anyone out, I said. I'm just not giving up my house. At that moment, there was a knock on the door. Rosalinda's voice. Amalia, what's going on in there? Open the door. Santiago rushed to the door and swung it open. On the threshold stood Rosalinda in her robe and slippers, alarmed. What's all the shouting? She asked. The whole block could hear it. And who called you? Asked Santiago rudely. Go home, Auntie. Don't talk to Rosalinda like that, I intervened. And you shut up, my son shouted, turning to me. I've had enough of your moralizing. Rosalind tried to enter the house. Amalia, what is he doing? She asked. Do you need help? Yes, I need help, I said. Santiago is demanding that I give him the house. What? Rosalinda was outraged. Santiago, are you crazy? Get out, roared the son. Nobody asked you. He ran into the kitchen and returned with a bucket of cold water by the sink. I didn't immediately realize what he was going to do. Santiago, don't, I shouted. But it was too late. My son splashed all the water on Rosalinda. She gasped and recoiled, wet from head to toe. That's what you get for interfering, Santiago shouted. You're crazy, shouted Rosalinda. You're completely crazy. Jimena stood at the stairs and looked at what was happening with her mouth open. Santiago, what are you doing? She asked. Putting the house in order, answered her husband. Now, Mom, pack your things and go to that wet chicken. The house stays with us. I'm not going anywhere, I screamed. Santiago grabbed my arm and dragged me to the door. You're going, and now! Let go of me! I tried to break free, but my son was much stronger. Santiago, stop! Rosalinda shouted. It's your mother! Shut up! He shouted and pushed me toward the exit. Get out of my house! This is not your house! I shouted, but Santiago was already pushing me out the door. Jimena ran up and grabbed my other arm. Come on, mother-in-law, don't be stubborn, she said. Stay with your neighbor and we'll get settled in. The two of them pushed me out into the yard. The door slammed shut and I heard the key turn in the lock. I stood in the middle of the yard in my nightgown and robe, unable to believe what was happening. My own son had kicked me out of my own home on my birthday. The night at Rosalind's house passed with almost no sleep. I lay on the narrow bed in the guest room, staring at the ceiling and replaying the events of last night in my head. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Santiago's face contorted with anger, heard him shout, "Get out of my house!" My own son called my house his own and threw me out into the street. Rosalind showed true friendliness. As we stood in the yard, wet and confused, the first thing she did was put her arms around me and said, "Come to my place, dear. There's nothing for you to do here." She took me to her room, gave me dry clothes, and made strong tea with honey. All the way she scolded Santiago with the last words, called him ungrateful and unscrupulous. How dare he raise his hand against his mother? She was indignant, rubbing my frozen shoulders with a towel. And on your birthday, it's just monstrous. Rosalinda's husband, Don Ricardo, worked as a night watchman at the cannery and was on shift. So we sat in the kitchen together, drinking tea and discussing what had happened. Rosalind was talking and I was silent, still not believing in the reality of what had happened. We should call the police, she insisted. Have them kick those invaders out of your house. No, I shook my head. This is my son. I can't. What kind of son is he to you after this? Rosalind was angry. A real son would never do that to his mother. But I knew I couldn't sue Santiago. No matter how badly he acted, he was still my child. In a small town, such a scandal would go public and the whole family would be shamed. In the morning, just before dawn, I heard voices coming from outside my house. Looking out the window, I saw the neighbors gathered at the gate and discussed something. News of the night's scandal had already spread through the neighborhood. Don Eduardo was pointing toward the house, and Señora Beatriz was shaking her head disapprovingly. I was ashamed now everyone would know that my son had thrown me out of my own house. Rosalind got up early, as she always did. She was a lark and believed the day should start at dawn. She made breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, fresh coffee. I ate without appetite, wondering what to do next. Amalia, you can't just sit and wait, Rosalind said, pouring me a second cup of coffee. You have to do something. Like what? Well, like talk to a lawyer or someone from the city. I mean, you have the deed to the house. The deed. I remembered that all the papers were in the safe in the bedroom. Santiago has them now. But it didn't matter. The town hall had copies of all my title deeds. Rosalinda, can I use your phone? I asked. I want to call Ephraim. Of course, dear. The phone is in the living room. I dialed the number and heard a familiar voice. Ephraim, it's Amalia. Can you come over? I need help. What's wrong, Mrs. Amalia? He's worried. Is there a problem with the stores? No, there's nothing wrong with the stores. It's a personal matter, very serious. Okay, I'll be there in half an hour. Where are we meeting? Rosalind's. Do you know where she lives? Yes, of course, I'll be right there. Ephraim showed up even earlier than promised. Neatly dressed as always, briefcase in hand. I could see from his face that he was worried. It was rare that I made personal requests of him. Rosalind met him at the door and ushered him into the living room. We sat down at a small table by the window. Ephraim took out a notebook and a pen, the habit of a businessman who is accustomed to write everything down. Tell me, Donna Amalia, he said. What happened? I told him everything, from the appearance of the drunk Santiago to the way he threw me out of the house. Ephraim listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, he put down his pen and shook his head. It's just unbelievable, he said. How can his son do that to his mother? He can, I grinned bitterly. As you can see, he can. You should go to the police immediately, Ephraim said. You have all the proof of ownership. You've been illegally evicted from your own home. Ephraim, I will not sue my son, I said firmly. It's out of the question. But Donna Amalia, Ilin. That's the final decision. Ephraim thought for a moment, tapping his pen on his notebook. Then what do you suggest? He asked. We can't leave it like this. I looked out the window at my house. The shutters on all the windows were closed and no one was visible in the yard. Santiago and Jimena were probably sleeping off last night's scandal. Ephraim, how much could my house be worth? I asked. Your house? He was surprised. Why do you want to know? I want to sell it. Ephraim dropped his pen. Sell it? Doña Amalia, are you serious? I'm dead serious. I want to sell the house and buy something smaller, away from here. Rosalinda, who had been silently listening to our conversation, splashed her hands. Amalia, what are you saying? She exclaimed. This is your house. You've lived in it all your life. I have, I agreed. And now I want to live somewhere else. But where will you go? Rosalind couldn't help herself. You've got everything here, stores, friends, your whole life. The stores aren't going anywhere. Ephraim can run them. And as for the rest, I shrugged. I guess it was time for a change. Ephraim picked up his pen and picked up the notebook again. If you do decide to sell, you'll need to have the property appraised, he said in a businesslike tone. The house is large, 2 stories, in a good neighborhood, plus a plot of land. I think you can get 80 to 100,000. That much? I was surprised. Yes, the real estate market is not bad now, especially for houses in the central districts. I did the math in my head. 80 to 100,000 pesos. That's a lot of money by local standards. For that amount of money, you can buy a decent house somewhere in the resort town and still have enough left over to live comfortably. Where would you like to buy a new home? Ephraim asked. I wondered. Where would I want to live? I had spent my whole life in this town. I had rarely been away for a long time, but I'd always dreamed of the sea. Rafael promised that when he retired, we'd buy a house on the coast. But he died before he could fulfill that promise. Puerto Escondido, I said. I always wanted to live by the sea. Puerto Escondido is a small resort town on the Pacific coast, 3 hours from here. A beautiful place with clean beaches and a peaceful atmosphere. Rafael and I have gone there several times on vacation. It's a good choice, Ephraim approved. You can find a good house there for $30,000 or $40,000, and the rest of the money to live on. But how fast can you sell the house? I asked. I don't want to wait long. Ephraim thought for a moment. It usually takes a few months to sell a house, he said. You have to find a buyer, do the paperwork, make the sale. But if you're in a hurry, I'm in a hurry, I interrupted him. I'm in a hurry. Then we can try to find a buyer who is willing to pay cash, for a little less, but right away. Do you know anyone like that? Ephraim flipped through his notebook. There is one person, he said. Don Alonso Velasquez, cattle dealer, quite wealthy. Lately, he's been interested in real estate in the city, said he wanted to buy a house for his son who's getting married. Can you get in touch with him? Of course. But Donna Amalia, are you sure about your decision? Ephraim looked at me carefully. Selling a house is a big step. It would be hard to change your mind. I will not change my mind, I said firmly. Get in touch with this Don Alonso. Ephraim wrote something down in his notebook. Good. But first we have to get your papers out of the house. You can't sell without them. That was a problem. All the deeds to the house were in the safe in my bedroom. And the safe was in the house that Santiago took over. I'll try to talk to my son, I said. Maybe he'll let me take the papers. Maybe he won't, Rosalind said grimly. He's capable of anything after last night. Then we'll have to go to the town hall for duplicates, Ephraim said. It will take time, but it's possible. We discussed the details. Ephraim promised to contact Don Alonso today and see if he was interested in my house. If so, we can arrange an appointment to see it. In the meantime, where will you live? He asked. At my place, Rosalinda intervened. Until everything is settled, I was grateful to my friend, but I knew I couldn't abuse her hospitality for long. Rosalinda and her husband had their own lives, and the guest room was not fit for permanent residence. If Don Alonso was interested, how quickly could the deal be done? I asked. With all the documents in place, 2 weeks, Ephraim replied. Maybe a little longer. Depends on how quickly the bank verifies the money and makes the transfer. Will he pay through the bank? If the amount is large, yes. It's safer for all parties. We talked a little more about the technicalities, then Ephraim left. Doña Amalia, think again, he said in parting. Selling the house is an irreversible decision. I've already thought about it, I replied, and I've made up my mind. When Ephraim left, Rosalind sat next to me on the sofa. Amalia, I understand that you're upset, she said, but maybe you shouldn't make such big decisions in haste. Not in haste, I shook my head. I've been thinking about it all night, and I know it's for the best. But it's your house. You gave birth to your son there, lived the best years of your life with your husband. That's exactly why you have to leave, I interrupted. It's a house full of memories, and now it's full of pain. I couldn't live there after what had happened. Rosalind sighed. Well, if that's what you decide, but I'll miss you very much. Puerto Escondido isn't on another continent, I smiled. You'll come to visit, by the sea. I will, I promised her. I spent the rest of the day thinking about the future. For the first time in many years, I had the opportunity to radically change my life. Of course, the circumstances were sad, but the result could be quite good. A house by the sea, a quiet life without stress and family dramas, a chance to finally do something I truly enjoy. I've always loved to read, but in recent years I haven't had enough time. I loved cooking, but it's no fun cooking for one person. By the sea, you could make new friends, find new hobbies. In the evening, Ephraim called. Doña Amalia, good news, he said. Don Alonso is interested in your proposal. He wants to see the house tomorrow morning. That's great, I rejoiced. What time? 10 o'clock in the morning, but there's a problem. How do I get into the house? Your son is unlikely to let strangers in. That was indeed a problem. Santiago might not open the door, or he might make a scene at the sight of a potential buyer. I'll try to talk to him, I said. Maybe he'd be more reasonable than yesterday. Good. In the meantime, I'll prepare all the necessary information about the house. The square footage, the year it was built, the state of the utilities. Don Alonso is a serious man. He likes accurate data. When the conversation was over, I felt energized. For the first time in many hours, I had hoped that the situation could be resolved. Maybe being banished from home wasn't a tragedy, but a new opportunity. Rosalind was cooking dinner, humming something to herself. Her husband had returned from work and was sitting in the living room reading the newspaper. The usual family idyll in which I was a temporary guest. But tomorrow everything could change. If Don Alonso agreed to buy the house, in a couple weeks I would be a free woman with a decent amount of money and the opportunity to start a new life. The conversation with Santiago about showing the house to a potential buyer went exactly as I expected. When I went to the gate of my former house and knocked, Jimena opened the door. She looked bad. Disheveled hair, crumpled nightgown, eyes puffy from lack of sleep. What do you want? She asked, not inviting me in. I need to talk to Santiago, I answered. It's important. He's asleep. Don't bother him. Jimena, this is serious. Wake him up. The daughter-in-law reluctantly moved away from the door. A few minutes later, the son appeared, unshaven, angry, in his underwear and t-shirt. What is it again? He grumbled. I told you, the house is ours. Santiago, a man is coming here tomorrow morning who wants to buy the house. I said calmly. He needs to see everything. What buyer? My son became alarmed. What are you talking about? I'm selling the house, and you're going to have to move out. Santiago stared at me, not believing what I was hearing. Are you crazy? He shouted. What sale? You can't sell the house. Yes, I can. It's my house, and I can do what I want with it. But we live here, illegally, without my permission. Santiago clenched his fists. He had the same look of anger on his face as the night of the scandal. You wouldn't dare, he hissed. You wouldn't dare sell the roof over our heads. I dare, I said firmly. The buyer will come tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. Either you let him in or I'll bring the police. The police? Santiago laughed. They won't be on your side. I'll tell them what kind of mother you are, kicking your son out on the street. It was you who threw me out on the street, I reminded him. And now you're paying for it. The conversation ended in nothing. Santiago slammed the door, and I realized that tomorrow would be trouble. I had to prepare for the worst-case scenario. That evening, I told Ephraim about it on the phone. So he didn't agree to show the house? He clarified. To put it mildly, no. Tomorrow there will be a scandal. Then we must take action, Ephraim said after a pause. Doña Amalia, I have acquaintances who can help. What kind of acquaintances? The guys from the market, tough guys, work as loaders. Sometimes they can help me with, complicated issues. I know what he's talking about. There are people in every city who, for a small fee, are willing to use physical force to solve problems. Normally, I wouldn't approve of such methods, but this was an exceptional situation. Wouldn't they make too much noise? I asked. I didn't want the whole town to know about it. They're professionals, Ephraim assured me. They work quickly and without talking too much. How much will it cost? A couple thousand pesos. For 3 people. It was a small sum for me, considering that I was soon to receive about 80,000 for the house. Negotiate, I said. Just make sure they do it carefully. Sure, I'll meet you at your place tomorrow morning at 10:30. The night passed again with little sleep. I lay in bed at Rosalind's and wondered whether I was doing the right thing. On the one hand, it seemed monstrous to use force against my own son. On the other hand, he was the one who had used force first, kicking me out of the house. In the morning, I got up early, drank coffee, and put on my best dress, a dark blue, austere, business casual dress. If I'm going to sell the house, I have to look solid and respectable. Ephraim arrived at 10:30, as promised. With him were 3 men between 30 and 35 years of age, all of stout build, in work clothes, with serious faces. They introduced themselves simply as Juan, Carlos, and Ramon. Explain the situation to them, I asked Ephraim. I've already explained everything, he replied. They know what to do. We walked up to my house. The courtyard was silent, and the shutters on the windows were closed. Ephraim knocked on the door. A moment later, Chimina appeared in a robe. What do you want? She asked when she saw the strange men. We need to look around the house, Ephraim said politely. We are buyers, no buyers, Jimena shouted and tried to slam the door shut. But Juan, the largest of the 3, put his foot up and prevented her from doing so. Señorita, don't make this difficult, he said calmly. We need to get inside. Santiago, Jimena shouted. Come here, they're getting into the house. Quick footsteps were heard from the back of the house, and my son appeared. He was already dressed, but he looked worried. What's going on? He asked, looking at the 3 men appraisingly. We're here to look at the house for purchase, Ephraim explained. Your mother invited us. I didn't invite anyone, Santiago shouted. And the house is not for sale. Get out. Son, Carlos intervened, stepping forward. Don't cause trouble. We need to see the house and we're going to see it. Get out, Santiago roared. This is my house. It's yours? Ramon grinned. Do you have papers? What papers? It's my mother's house, so it's mine too. Exactly, said Juan. Your mother's house, and she's selling it, so you have no business here. Santiago tried to slam the door shut, but the 3 men pushed against it at the same time. My son was tough, but he didn't stand a chance against 3 professional movers. The door swung open, and the men entered the house. Get out, Santiago shouted. I'll call the police. Call them, Carlos said calmly. Tell them how you took over someone else's house. I stood at the gate and watched. My feelings were contradictory. On the one hand, I felt sorry for my son, and on the other hand, he had brought the situation to this state. Loud voices were coming from the house. Jimena was crying and begging not to touch their things. Santiago was cursing and threatening, but gradually the sounds died down. After 10 minutes, things began to be taken out of the house. First clothes in bags and suitcases, then dishes in boxes, then small things. Juan, Carlos, and Ramon worked methodically and calmly, like real movers. "Where should we put this stuff?" Juan asked, taking out another box. "Outside by the gate," Ephraim answered. The stuff was piled right on the sidewalk. Neighbors began to look out of their windows and gather in groups, discussing what was happening. Santiago and Jimena stood in the yard and watched helplessly as their possessions were carried out of the house. "Mom, tell them to stop," my son shouted when he saw me at the gate. "I can't," I said. "You have chosen this path." "But where are we going?" Jimena sobbed. "We have no money for rent." "You should have thought of that earlier," I said. The removal of things lasted about an hour. During that time, Don Alonso Velasquez arrived, a man in his 50s, wearing an expensive suit and a new car. He looked curiously at the pile of stuff at the gate and at the confused couple in the yard. "What's going on here?" he asked Ephraim. "We're evicting the squatters," he explained briefly. "The house will be vacated now and we can take a look at it." Don Alonso nodded understandingly. Apparently, he had been in this kind of situation in his business too. Finally, Juan came out of the house and said, "That's it. The house is vacant." Santiago and Jimena stood by their belongings, not knowing what to do next. My son looked at me with such hatred that I turned away. "Mom," he said quietly, but so that I could hear, "I will never forgive you for this." "And neither will I forgive you," I answered. Don Alonso inspected the house quickly and professionally. He checked the condition of the walls, roof, plumbing, electrical wiring. He walked through the rooms, looked in the basement and attic. He asked a few questions about the age of the house and recent repairs. "The house is in good condition," he said when we gathered again in the yard. "I'm happy with it." "And the price?" Ephraim asked. 80,000 is a fair price. I agree. We shook hands. The deal was done in principle. All that remained was the paperwork. "When can we sign the contract?" I asked. "Tomorrow, if you have all the papers," Don Alonso replied. "I'll transfer the money as soon as the deal is registered." When he left, I looked at the house again. My house, where I had spent most of my life. Now it belonged to someone else. It was a little sad, but it didn't hurt. The pain was behind me, along with yesterday. Santiago and Jimena were still standing by the pile of their belongings. Some man with a pickup truck approached them, apparently a friend who had agreed to help with the transportation. They started loading the stuff into the back of the truck. "Thank you," I said to the three movers. "You've been very helpful." "You are welcome, Senora," Juan replied. "If you need anything else, please don't hesitate to ask." Ephraim paid them and they left. We were left alone in the courtyard of the empty house. "Well, Dona Amalia," Ephraim said, "now we can start a new life." "Yes," I agreed. It was time. The next few days were spent in paperwork. We had to go to the town hall, to the registry office, to the notary. Ephraim helped with the paperwork. He was better versed in the intricacies of the law. Finally, a week after Santiago's eviction, the deal was finalized. 80,000 pesos were deposited into my bank account. That same day, Ephraim and I drove to Puerto Escondido to look for a house. It was a 3-hour drive up a mountain road to the resort town. The views outside the window gradually changed. Instead of dry hills, there was tropical vegetation, and the air smelled of the sea. Puerto Escondido met us with bright sunshine and shouts of seagulls. The city was small but picturesque. White houses with red roofs, palm trees along the streets, cozy cafes and stores. And everywhere, a stunning view of the ocean. We stayed at a small hotel in the center and started looking for a suitable house. The realtor, an elderly lady named Carmelita, showed us several options. The first house was too big and expensive. The second was in poor condition. The third was too far from the sea. But the fourth turned out to be perfect. A small one-story house 5 minutes walk from the beach. White walls, blue shutters, red tiled roof. Spacious living room with large windows, cozy bedroom, functional kitchen, small bathroom, and most importantly, a tiny but very nice garden with a lemon tree and a flower bed. But what struck me most of all was the view from the window. Between the two neighboring houses, there was a stunning view of the ocean, blue water all the way to the horizon, white lambs of waves, and a beach of golden sand. How much? I asked Senora Carmelita. 35,000 pesos, she replied. The price was final. I did a quick calculation in my mind. 35,000 for the house and another 5,000 for furnishings. That left 40,000 that would be enough for many years of peaceful living, considering that the expenses by the sea are much less than in the city. I'll take it, I said. Doña Amalia, maybe we should think about it, Efrain suggested. Look at other options? No, I shook my head. This is my home, I can feel it. Senora Carmelita smiled. You have good taste, Senora, she said. This is a really special place. The previous owners loved it very much. Why are they selling? They're moving to Mexico City with their children. They're not old enough to live alone. We went back to the hotel and I asked Efrain to help me with the purchase. The next day we met the sellers, an elderly couple, Don Enrique and Doña Margarita. Lovely people who were really sad to part with the house. You will be happy here, said Doña Margarita as she handed me the keys. This place is special. You feel free here. Free. That was the word I had been missing. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. The deal was done quickly, and by evening, I owned the house. Efrain helped me transfer the money, and I received the title deeds. We sat on the terrace of my new house, drinking tequila and watching the sunset over the ocean. The sun was slowly sinking toward the horizon, coloring the sky pink and orange. The waves lapped gently against the shore. Music was playing somewhere. Children were laughing. You know, Donna Amalia, said Efrain, I think you've made the right decision. I think so too, I answered. For the first time in a long time, I feel that I am living for myself. What will you do about the stores? Nothing yet. You can run them from now on, can't you? You'll send the profits here. Sure, no problem. We talked a little more about business, and then Efrain started to drive back. He had to be at the stores tomorrow. Efrain, I said as he said goodbye, tomorrow morning, find a notary and make an appointment for me. Why? I want to change my will. Efrain nodded understandingly. You're excluding Santiago? Both him and Jimena, I confirmed, completely. And who will you leave the inheritance to, I wondered. Really, to whom? There were no more children, no close relatives. I don't know yet, I answered. Maybe to you for your faithful service, or Rosalind for her friendship, or charity. I'll think about it. Good, I'll find a notary. When Efrain left, I was alone in my new home. For the first time in many days, in complete silence, without voices or clutter. I sat on the terrace, listening to the sound of the ocean and planning my new life. Tomorrow I would buy furniture and groceries. The day after tomorrow, I would start the garden. Maybe I'll get a job. Not necessarily for money, but just to have something to do. Or I'll sign up for an English course. I've always wanted to learn a foreign language, and I'll invite Rosalind to visit. Let her see my new home and make sure I made the right choice. The stars appeared over the ocean one by one. Quiet, beautiful, peaceful. No one yelling, no one demanding, no one threatening. Just me and a new life that starts right now. It's been a month since I moved to Puerto Escondido. A month of a new life that flowed as measured and calm as the surf at my doorstep. I set up the house, planted a flower garden, got to know my neighbors. In the mornings, I drank coffee on the terrace, listening to the cries of seagulls. In the evenings, I read books to the sound of the waves. For the first time in many years, I felt truly peaceful. Saturday morning, Rosalind arrived. I met her at the bus station. She looked tired after a 3-hour drive, but her eyes shone with curiosity. Amalia, she exclaimed, hugging me. How beautiful you look! You look 10 years younger. We reached the house on foot, just 15 minutes leisurely stroll through the quiet streets. Rosalind admired everything around her. White houses under red roofs, palm trees, flowering bushes, and iguanas basking in the sun. What beauty, she repeated. And how quiet it is here. It's not like in the city. The house impressed her even more. Rosalind went through all the rooms, looked in the garden, stood on the terrace for a long time, admiring the view of the ocean. "Amalia, this is paradise," she said. "You're so good for moving." We sat on the terrace with coffee and a homemade cake that I had baked especially for her arrival. Rosalind told me the news from the city: who got married, who got divorced, who had children, who started a new business. The usual provincial life with its little joys and sorrows. "And how are things in the stores?" I asked. "Ephraim says they're doing well. Profits are even up a little. He's found new suppliers with better prices." We talked about small things for a long time, but I sensed that Rosalind was hiding something. She wasn't the kind of person who could keep important news to herself for long, but she was clearly stalling. "Rosalind," I said at last, "what's wrong? You didn't just come to see my house." My friend sighed and set her cup aside. "You're right," she said. "There is news about Santiago." My heart clenched. I'd tried not to think about my son for a month, but I couldn't forget him completely. No matter how hard I tried, he was my child. "What's wrong with him?" I asked, trying to sound indifferent. "Jimena left him," Rosalind said quietly. "2 weeks after you evicted them." I wasn't surprised. Jimena had married Santiago not for love, but because he seemed reliable. He had a job, a mother with money, the prospect of an inheritance. When all that disappeared, she quickly realized that she had nothing more to do around him. "So what's next?" I asked. "She went to live with her mother in another state. And Santiago—" Rosalind was silent. "Santiago went downhill. He lost his job because he drank on the job. Now he lives wherever he can, from one acquaintance to another, and more often just on the street." "On the street?" "Yeah. He's been seen sleeping in the park at the bus stop. He looks terrible, dirty, unshaven, tattered clothes, begging outside the church." Tears come to my eyes. As bad a son as Santiago was, I couldn't bear to see him homeless. "Maybe we should help him," Rosalinda suggested cautiously. "Give him money. Find a place to live." "No," I shook my head. "I've been trying to help him all my life. You can see the results." "But he's your son. He made his choice. When he kicked me out of the house, when he threw water on you, when he shouted that I was an old woman, he chose this path for himself." Rosalind nodded understandingly. She was right. You can't spend your life saving someone who doesn't want to be saved. We talked about things for a while longer, then went for a walk on the beach. Rosalind marveled at the ocean. In our inner city, many people had never seen the sea in their lives. We collected shells, took pictures against the waves, and ate ice cream at a beachside cafe. In the evening, as the sun began to set, we sat on the terrace again. Rosalind was dozing in a chair, tired from the day's experiences, and I was looking at the ocean and thinking about Santiago. Where is he now? What is he eating? Where is he sleeping? Is he cold at night? Despite all the hurt, he was still my child, and my motherly heart ached for him. Tears ran down my cheeks. I cried quietly so as not to wake Rosalind. I cried for a son who could have been a good man but chose a different path. I cried for a broken family, for lost hopes, for the fact that some mistakes cannot be undone. The ocean rumbled below, waves lapping at the shore and rolling back. The eternal rhythm of nature that goes on regardless of human dramas and tragedies. The sun was slowly sinking towards the horizon, coloring the water with golden hues. I wiped my tears and took a deep breath of salty sea air. Yes, I'm hurting for my son. Yes, I will worry about him for the rest of my life. But I can't change his fate. He has to make his own way. And now I have a new life. A calm, measured one, without drama and scandals. It may be selfish, but I have a right to happiness in my remaining years. Rosalind woke up when it was dark. "Oh, I fell asleep," she said guiltily. "I must be tired from the road." "That's all right," I smiled. "The sea air makes you sleepy." We went into the house for supper. I made fish and vegetables, a dish I'd learned from my neighbors. Rosalind praised my cooking and said she had never seen me so peaceful. "You know, Amalia," she said at dinner, "maybe what happened to Santiago was for the best. For you, anyway." "Maybe," I agreed. "It still hurts, though." "Of course it hurts. You're the mother, but it's not your fault what he's become." The next day I walked Rosalind to the bus. My friend promised to come back regularly and invite me to visit her. Just don't go back to that town for good, she asked. You found peace here. I won't, I promised. This is my home now. The bus took Rosalinda away, and I walked home along the familiar road. I made tea on the terrace and sat looking out at the ocean. Tomorrow begins a new week, new plans, new worries, and somewhere far away my son is wandering the streets, looking for a place to sleep and thinking about how to get money for another bottle. That's our life now. Me by the sea, him on the street. I guess that's the way it has to be.